All right, we are coming up on 8 o'clock. So, let's settle in, get comfortable, pull up a chair, and grab yourself a drink, because we have just a little bit more to go tonight. Welcome back. Tonight is our 13th session of reading from Cervantes' Don Quixote. We are very, very close to the end of the first volume, and looking ahead, it felt appropriate, and, dare I say, relieving, to take a break from Don Quixote here. We'll finish Volume 1, and that'll be a clean breaking point, so that we can start something else. We've got an entire world of literature available to us. And the second volume is even longer than the first. So I think we could all use a little bit of a break from the misadventures of the Manchegan man-at-arms. Simba. Yes, hello. So, with that, we need to start thinking of what we want to read next. I do think we won't be using the full time tonight for our reading, so we've got a little bit of time to pass around ideas, or just reminisce of the bathroom humor of Don Quixote and Sancho, or the repeated, violent outbursts of Don Quixote himself against really about anyone who he comes across. He's not exactly a stand-up role model, is he? It's one thing to be passionate about what you do, but I do think all things in moderation. And, I think all of us, when we were young, had ideas of running around pretending to be knights or anime characters, or whatever the case may be. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like, take your pick of let your imagination go. You don't necessarily need to grow out of it, but you need to be able to slip in and out of character, right? Even the most potent of method actors know sometimes you need to get out of character. Don Quixote does not. Hey, no. They're popular again, don't you know? They are popular again. Ish. I don't know if it's quite to what it was in the 80s, but I stand by it. Kids today, they at least know their names. Or the colors, at least. I hope. No, that is not why I said it. We can pretend, though, can't we? You and I are both old and we know it. It's alright. It's alright. Alright, so we've got a little bit of book left ahead of us tonight. And when we finish, we'll have a little bit of time left over, I believe, to sort of spitball ideas for what we want to read next. I have a few ideas of myself, but as always, I am always open to suggestions, because I find myself getting a certain sort of styling, and if I let myself, we will sort of fall into the comfortable rut of following the trail as we go along my own musings and meanderings through literature. But that's where's the fun in that? If you're not adventuring, if you're not finding new things to challenge yourself and tickle the imagination, you might as well just start tilting at windmills. So, challenge me. Have ideas of books that I wouldn't have chosen otherwise. And the worst I can say is, you brought this on yourself. I won't even say no. It's, you deserve what you're going to get. Alright, let's go ahead and shift over to our reading nook, and we'll get started with tonight's reading. We'll get through the rest of Don Quixote tonight, the volume 1, that is, and we'll see what remaining misadventures there are. You may recall that Don Quixote was locked in an oaken cage and being hauled away on an ox cart back to La Mancha. Back home to, well, not home to Dulcinea, but in the general vicinity. But Sancho seems to think that there's something wrong. This can't just be an enchantment. These are people he knows, and I mean he's locked in he's shut up in a box. What sort of enchanter locks up knights in a box? So, let's continue now and see what we'll see tonight. So, we resume tonight with chapter 49 of Don Quixote, which treats of the shrewd conversation which Sancho Panza held with his master, Don Quixote. Simba, either sit or something, just... Yes, okay, there we go. Alright. "Aha! I have caught you," said Sancho. "This is what in my heart and soul I was longing to know. Come now, senor, can you deny what is commonly said around us, when a person is out of humor? I don't know what ails so-and-so, that he neither eats, nor drinks, nor sleeps, nor gives a proper answer to any question. One would think he was enchanted. From which it is to be gathered that those who do not eat, or drink, or sleep, or do any of the natural acts I am speaking of, that such persons are enchanted, but not those that have the desire your worship has, and drink when drink is given them, and eat when there is anything to eat, and answer every question that is asked them." "What thou sayest is true, Sancho," replied Don Quixote, "but I have already told thee there are many sorts of enchantments, and it may be that in the course of time they have been changed one for another, and that now it may be the way with enchanted people to do all that I do, though they did not do so before, so it is vain to argue or draw inferences against the usage of the time. I know and feel that I am enchanted, and that is enough to ease my conscience, for it would weigh heavily on it if I thought that I was not enchanted, and that in a faint-hearted and cowardly way I allowed myself to lie in this cage, defrauding multitudes of the succor I might afford to those in need and distress, who at this very moment may be in sore want of my aid and protection." "Still, for all that," replied Sancho, "I say that, for your greater and fuller satisfaction, it would be well if your worship were to try to get out of this prison, and I promise to do all in my power to help, and even to take you out of it, and see if you could once more mount your good Rocinante, who seems to be enchanted too, so he is so melancholy and dejected, and then we might try our chance in looking for adventures again, and if we have no luck, there will be time enough to go back to the cage, in which, on the faith of a good and loyal squire, I promise to shut myself up along with your worship, if so be you are so unfortunate, or I so stupid, as not to be able to carry out my plan." "I am content to do as thou sayest, brother Sancho," said Don Quixote, "and when thou seest an opportunity for effecting my release, I will obey thee absolutely. But thou wilt see, Sancho, how mistaken thou art in thy conception of my misfortune." The knight-errant and the ill-errant squire kept up their conversation till they reached the place where the curate, the canon, and the barber, who had already dismounted, were waiting for them. The carter at once unyoked the oxen and left them to roam at large about the pleasant green spot, the freshness of which seemed to invite not enchanted people like Don Quixote, but wide-awake, sensible folk like his squire, who begged the curate to allow his master to leave the cage for a little. If they did not let him out, the prison might not be as clean as the propriety of such a gentleman as his master required. The curate understood him, and said he would very gladly comply with his request, only that he feared his master, finding himself at liberty, would take to his old courses, and make off where nobody could ever find him again. "I will answer for his not running away," said Sancho. The canon, okay. "And I also," said the canon, "especially if he gives me his word as a knight not to leave us without our consent." Don Quixote, who was listening to all this, said, "I give it. Moreover, one who is enchanted as I am cannot do as he likes with himself, for he who had enchanted him could prevent his moving from one place for 3 ages, and if he attempted to escape, would bring him back flying. And that being so, they might as well release him, particularly as it would be to the advantage of all, for if they did not let him out, he protested he would be unable to avoid offending their nostrils unless they kept their distance. Oh yes, we are back to the bathroom humor. The canon took his hand, tied together as they both were, and on his word and promise they unbound him, and rejoiced beyond measure he was to find himself out of the cage. The first thing he did was to stretch himself all over, and then he went to where Rocinante was standing, and giving him a couple of slaps on the haunches, said, "I still trust in God, and in his blessed mother, O flower and mirror of steeds, that we shall soon see ourselves, both of us, as we wish to be. Thou with thy master on thy back, and I mounted upon thee, following the calling for which God sent me into the world." And so saying, accompanied by Sancho, he withdrew to a retired spot, from which he came back much relieved, and more eager than ever to put his squire's scheme into execution. The canon gazed at him, wondering at the extraordinary nature of his madness, and that in all his remarks and replies he should show such excellent sense, and only lose his stirrups, as has been already said, when the subject of chivalry was broached. And so moved by compassion, he said to him, as they all sat on the green grass awaiting the arrival of his provisions, "Is it possible, gentle sir, that the nauseous and idle reading of books of chivalry can have had such an effect on your worship as to upset your reason so that you fancy yourself enchanted, and the like, all as far from the truth as falsehood itself is? How can there be any human understanding that can persuade itself there ever was in all that infinity of Amadises in the world, or all that multitude of famous knights, all those emperors of Trebizond, all those Felix Marts of Hircania, all those palfreys and damsels errant, and serpents and monsters and giants, and marvellous adventures and enchantments of every kind, and battles and prodigious encounters, splendid costumes, lovesick princesses, squires made counts, droll dwarfs, love letters, billings and cooing swashbuckler women, and, in a word, all that nonsense the books of chivalry contain?" "Sir, you are awfully well informed as to what the books of chivalry contain." "But myself, I can only say that when I read them, so long as I do not stop to think that they are all lies and frivolity, they give me a certain amount of pleasure. But when I come to consider what they are, I fling the very best of them at the wall, and would fling it into the fire if there was one hand, as richly deserving such punishment as cheats and impostors out of the range of ordinary toleration, and as founders of new sects and modes of life, and teachers that lead the ignorant public to believe and accept as truth all the folly they contain. And such is their audacity, they even dare to unsettle the wits of gentlemen of birth and intelligence, as is shown plainly by the way they have served your worship, when they have brought you to such a pass that you have to be shut up in a cage and carried on an ox-cart as one would carry a lion or a tiger from place to make money by showing it. Signor Don Quixote, have some compassion for yourself. Return to the bosom of common sense, and make use of the liberal share of it that heaven has been pleased to bestow upon you, employing your abundant gifts of mind in some other reading that may serve to benefit your conscience and add to your honor. And if, still led away by your natural bent, you desire to read books of achievement and of chivalry, read the books of judges in the Holy Scriptures, for there you will find grand reality in deeds as true as they are heroic. It's Spain in the 1600s. It's Spain in the 1600s. Remember, bite the tongue. Lusitania had a Viriatus, Rome a Caesar, Carthage a Hannibal, Greece an Alexander, Castile a Count Ferdinand Gonzalez, Valencia a Cid, Andalusia a Gonzalo Fernandez, Estremadura a Diego Garcia de Paredes, Jerez a Garcia Perez de Vargas, Toledo a Garcilaso, Seville a Don Manuel de Leon, to read of whose valiant deeds will entertain and instruct the loftiest mind and fill them with delight and wonder. Here, Signor Don Quixote, will be reading worthy of your sound understanding, from which you will rise learned in history, in love with virtue, strengthened in goodness, improved in manners, brave without rashness, prudent without cowardice, and all to the honor of God, your own advantage, and the glory of La Mancha, whence, I am informed, your worship derived your birth. Don Quixote listened with the greatest attention to the canon's words, and when he found he had finished, after regarding him for some time, he replied to him, "It appears to me, gentle sir, that your worship's discourse is intended to persuade me that there never were any knights-errant in the world, and that all the books of chivalry are false, lying, mischievous, and useless to the state, and that I have done wrong in reading them, and worse, in believing them, and still worse, in imitating them, when I undertook to follow the arduous calling of knight-errantry which they set forth. For you deny that there ever were Amadises of Gaul, or of Greece, or of any other of the knights of whom the books are full." "It is all exactly as you stated," said the canon. To which Don Quixote returned, "You also went on to say that books of this kind have done me much harm, inasmuch as they had upset my senses and shut me in a cage, and that it would be better for me to reform and change my studies, and read other, truer books, which would afford more pleasure and instruction." "Just so," said the canon. "Well then," returned Don Quixote, "to my mind, it is you who are the one that is out of his wits and enchanted, as you have ventured to utter such blasphemies against a thing so universally acknowledged and accepted as true, that whoever denies it, as you do, deserves the same punishment which you say you inflict on the books that irritate you when you read them. For to try to persuade anybody that Amadis and all the other knights adventurers with whom the books are filled never existed would be like trying to persuade him that the sun does not yield light, or ice cold, or earth nourishment. What wit in the world can persuade another that the story of the Princess Floripes and Guy of Is it Guy? I think it's Guy. And Guy of Burgundy is not true. Or that of Fierovas, and the bridge of Mantible, which happened in the time of Charlemagne. For by all that is good, it is as true as it is daylight now. And if it be a lie, it must be a lie too, that there was a Hector, or Achilles, or Trojan War, or 12 peers of France, or Arthur of England, who still lives changed into a raven, and is unceasingly looked for in his kingdom. I must have missed that in Le Morte d'Arthur. One might just as well try to make out that the history of Guarino Meschino, or of the quest of the Holy Grail, is false, or that the loves of Tristram and the Queen Iseult are apocryphal, as well as those of Guinevere and Lancelot, when there are persons who can almost remember having seen the Dame Quintagnona, who was the best cupbearer in Great Britain. And so true is this, that I recollect a grandmother of mine on the father's side, whenever she saw any dame in venerable hood, used to say to me, "Grandson, that one is like the Dame Quintagnona," from which I conclude that she must have known her, or at least had managed to see some portrait of her. Then who can deny that the story of Pierre and the fair Magalona is true, when even to this day may be seen in the king's armory the pin with which the valiant Pierre guided the wooden horse he rode through the air. And it is a trifle bigger than the pole of a cart. And alongside of the pin is Babieca's saddle. And at Roncesvalles there is Roland's horn, as large as a large beam, whence we may infer that there were 12 peers, and a Pierre and a Cid and other knights like them, of the sort people commonly call adventurers. Or perhaps I shall be told too that there was no such knight-errant as the valiant Lusitanian Juan de Merlot, who went to Burgundy, and in the city of Arras fought with the famous lord of Charny, Morson Pierre by name. And afterwards, in the city of Bessin, with Morson Enrique de Remesen, coming out of both encounters covered with fame and honor, or adventures and challenges achieved and delivered also in Burgundy, by the valiant Spaniards Pedro Barba and Gutierrez Quijara, of whose family I come in the direct male line, when they vanquished the sons of the Count of San Polo. I shall be told, too, that Don Fernando de Guevara did not go in quest of adventures to Germany, where he engaged in combat with Messer George, a knight of the house of the Duke of Austria. I shall be told that the jousts of Suero de Quiñones, him of the Paso, and the emprise of Morson Louis de Francais against the Castilian knight Don Gonzalo de Guzman were mere mockeries, as well as many other achievements of Christian knights of those in foreign realms, which are so authentic and true that, I repeat, he who denies them must be totally wanting in reason and good sense. Spare me the laundry list of names, please. That was a page or two. And looking ahead, there's more. The canon was amazed to hear the medley of truth and fiction Don Quixote uttered, and to see how well acquainted he was with everything relating or belonging to the achievements of his knight-errantry. So he said in reply, "I cannot deny, Signor Don Quixote, that there is some truth in what you say. Especially as regards the Spanish knights-errant, and I am willing to grant too that the 12 peers of France existed, but I am not disposed to believe that they did all the things that the Archbishop Turpin relates to them. For the truth of the matter is, they were knights chosen by the kings of France, and called peers because they were all equal in worth, rank, and prowess. At least if they were not, they ought to have been. And it was a kind of religious order, like those of Santiago Calatrava in the present day, in which it is assumed that those who take it are valiant knights of distinction and good birth, And just as we say now, a knight of St. John or of Alcantara, they used to say then, a knight of the 12 peers, because 12 equals were chosen for that military order. That there was a Cid, as well as a Bernardo de Calpio, there can be no doubt. But that they did the deeds people say they did, I hold to be very doubtful. In that other matter of the pin of Count Pierre that you speak of, and say is near Babieca's saddle in the armory, I confess my sin, for I am either too stupid or so short-sighted that, though I have seen the saddle, I have never been able to see the pin, in spite of it being as big as your worship says it is. For all that it is there, without any manner of doubt, said Don Quixote, and more, by token, they say it is enclosed in a sheath of cowhide, to keep it from rusting. All that may be, replied the canon, but, by the orders I have received, I do not remember seeing it. Oh, that's kind of cool. I didn't realize that. However, granting it is there, that is no reason why I am bound to believe the stories of all those Amadises and all that multitude of knights they tell us about. Nor is it reasonable that a man like your worship, so worthy and with so many good qualities, and endowed with such good understanding, should allow himself to be persuaded that such wild, crazy things as are written in those absurd books of chivalry are really true. Oh, he's a smug bastard. This is the canon. Oh, lordy. That is not a flattering picture there, buddy. All right, that brought us to the end of chapter 49, and brings us into now chapter 50. Ah, nice round 50. I'll be damned. Of the shrewd controversy which Don Quixote and the canon held, together with other incidents. I wonder how much of the time that we've got, or the remaining chapters we have, are just Don Quixote arguing with the canon. Because, let's go back. If there is a 1600s Spanish version of Actually Guy, just saying. Yeah, this is just, it's like, actually, in Spanish. All right. So, let's continue with chapter 50 now. A good joke, that, returned Don Quixote. Books that have been printed with the king's license and with the approbation of those to whom they have been submitted, and read with universal delight, and extolled by great and small, rich and poor, learned and ignorant, gentle and simple. In a word, by people of every sort of whatever rank or condition they may be, that these should be lies. And above all, when they carry such an appearance of truth with them. For they tell us the father, mother, country, kindred, age, place, and the achievements, step by step, and day by day, performed by such a knight or knights. Hush, said, utter not such blasphemy. Trust me, I am advising you now to act as a sensible man should. Only read them, and you will see the pleasure you will derive from them. For, come, tell me, can there be anything more delightful than to see, as it were, here now displayed before us, a vast lake of bubbling pitch with a host of snakes and serpents and lizards and ferocious and terrible creatures of all sorts swimming in it, while From the middle of the lake there comes a plaintive voice, saying, Knight, whosoever thou art who beholdest this dread lake, if thou wouldst win the prize that lies hidden beneath these dusky waves, prove thy valour of thy stout heart, and cast thyself into the midst of its dark, burning waters. Else thou shalt not be worthy to see the mighty wonders contained in the 7 castles of the 7 fays that lie beneath this black expanse. And then the knight, almost ere the awful voices ceased, without stopping to consider, without pausing to reflect upon the danger to which he is exposing himself, without even relieving himself of the weight of his massive armor, commending himself to God and to his lady, plunges into the midst of the boiling lake. And when he little looks for it, or knows what his fate is to be, he finds himself among flowery meadows, with which the Elysian fields are not to be compared. Presumably this is the foul marsh that he's charging into here. The sky seems more transparent there, and the sun shines with a strange brilliancy, and a delightful grove of green leafy trees presents itself to the eyes and charms the sight of it with its verdure, while the ear is soothed by the sweet, untutored melody of the countless birds of gay plumage that flit to and fro among the interlacing branches. Here he sees a brook whose limpid waters, like liquid crystal, ripple over fine sands and white pebbles that look like sifted gold and purest pearls. There he perceives a cunningly wrought fountain of many-colored jasper and polished marble. Here another of rustic fashion, where the little mussel shells and the spiral white and yellow mansions of the snail, disposed in studious disorder, mingled with fragments of glittering crystal and mock emeralds, make up a work of varied aspect, where art, imitating nature, seems to have outdone it. Suddenly there is presented to his sight a strong castle, a gorgeous palace, with walls of massy gold, turrets of diamond, and gates of jacinth. In short, so marvellous is its structure that though the materials of which it is built are nothing less than diamonds, carbuncles, rubies, pearls, gold, and emeralds, the workmanship is still more rare. And after having seen all this, what can be more charming than to see how a bevy of damsels comes forth from the gate of the castle in gay and gorgeous attire, such that, were I to set myself now to depict it as the histories describe it to us, I should never have done. And then how she, who seems to be the first among them all, takes the bold knight, who plunged into the boiling lake by the hand, and without addressing a word to him, leads him into the rich palace or castle, and strips him as naked as when his mother bore him, and bathes him in lukewarm water, and anoints him all over with sweet-smelling unguents, and clothes him in a shirt of the softest sendal, all scented and perfumed, while another damsel comes and throws over his shoulder a mantle, which is said to be worth at the very least a city, and even more. How charming it is then, when they tell us how, after all this, they lead him to another chamber, where he finds the tables set out in such style that he is filled with amazement and wonder to see how they pour out water for his hands, distilled from amber and sweet-scented flowers, how they seat him on an ivory chair to see how the damsels wait on him, all in profound silence, how they bring him such a variety of dainties so temptingly prepared that the appetite is at a loss which to select. To hear the music that resounds while he is at table, by whom or whence produced he knows not. And when the repast is over, and the tables removed, for the knight to recline in the chair, picking his teeth, perhaps as usual, and a damsel, much lovelier than any of the others, to enter unexpectedly by the chamber door, and herself by his side, and begin to tell him what the castle is, and how she is held enchanted there, and other things that amaze the knight and astonish the readers who are perusing his history. but I will not expatiate any further upon this, as it may be gathered from it that whatever part of whatever history of a knight-errant one reads, it will fill the reader, whoever he be, with delight and wonder. And take my advice, sir, and, as I said before, read these books, and you will see how they will banish any melancholy you may feel and raise your spirits should they be depressed. For myself, I can say that since I have been a knight-errant, I have become valiant, polite, generous, well-bred, magnanimous, courteous, dauntless, gentle, patient, and have learned to bear hardships, imprisonments, and enchantments. And though it be such a short time since I have seen myself shut up in a cage like a madman, I hope, by the might of my arm, if heaven aid me and fortune thwart me not, to see myself king of some kingdom, where I may be able to show the gratitude and generosity that dwell in my heart. For by my faith, Signor, the poor man is incapacitated from showing the virtue of generosity to anyone, though he may possess it in the highest degree. And gratitude that consists of disposition only is a dead thing, just as faith without works is dead. For this reason, I should be glad were fortune soon to offer me some opportunity of making myself an emperor, so as to show my heart in doing good to my friends, particularly to this poor Sancho Panza, my squire, who is the best fellow in the world, and I would gladly give him a county I have promised him this ever so long, only that I'm afraid he has not the capacity to govern his realm. Sancho partly heard these last words of his master, and said to him, "Strive hard, you, Signor Don Quixote, to give me that county so often promised by you and so long looked for by me, for I promise you, there will be no want of capacity in me to govern it. And even if there is, I have heard say there are men in the world who farm signores, paying so much a year, and they themselves taking charge of the government, while the Lord, with his legs stretched out, enjoys the revenue they pay him, without troubling himself about anything else. That's what I'll do, and not stand haggling over trifles, but wash my hands at once to the whole business, and enjoy my rents like a duke, and let things go their own way." "That, brother Sancho," said the canon, "only holds good as far as the enjoyment of the revenue goes. But the lord of the Signore must attend to the administration of justice, and here capacity and sound judgment come in, and above all, a firm determination to find out the truth. For if this be wanting in the beginning, the middle and the end will always go wrong, and God as commonly aids the honest intentions of the simple as he frustrates the evil designs of the crafty." "I don't understand those philosophies," returned Sancho Panza. "All I know is, I had the county as soon as I shall know how to govern it. For I have as much soul as another, and as much body as anyone, and I shall be as much king of my realm as any other of his. And being so, I should do as I liked, and doing as I liked, I should please myself, and pleasing myself, I should be content. And when one is content, he has nothing more to desire. And when one has nothing more to desire, there is an end of it. So let the county come, and God be with you, and let us see one another, as one blind man said to the other." "It is not a bad philosophy thou art talking, Sancho," said the canon, "but for all that there is a good deal to be said on the matter of counties." To which Don Quixote returned, "I know not what more there is to be said. I only guide myself by the example set me by the great Amadis of Gaul, when he made his squire count of the Insula Firme, and so, without any scruples of conscience, I can make a count of Sancho Panza, for he is one of the best squires that ever knight-errant had." As much as Sancho and Don Quixote are each other's worst enemies, they are also the best bros. Like, they continually look for and find the best in each other, despite constantly kneecapping each other. Yeah, that is just how it works. The canon was astonished at the methodical nonsense, if nonsense be capable of method, that Don Quixote uttered, at the way in which he had described the adventure of the Knight of the Lake, at the impression that the deliberate lies of the books he read had made upon him, and lastly, he marveled at the simplicity of Sancho, who desired so eagerly to obtain the county his master had promised him. By this time, the canon's servants, who had gone to the inn to fetch the sumpter mule, had returned, and making a carpet in the green grass of the meadow serve as a table, they seated themselves in the shade of some trees and made their repast there, that the carter might not be deprived of the advantage of the spot, as has been already said. As they were eating, they suddenly heard a loud noise, and the sound of a bell that seemed to come from among some brambles and thick bushes that were close by, and the same instant they observed a beautiful goat, spotted all over black, white, and brown, spring out of the thicket, and with a goat herd after it, calling to it and uttering the usual cries to make it stop or turn back to the fold. The fugitive goat, scared and frightened, ran towards the company, as if seeking their protection, and then stood still, and the goatherd, coming up, seized it by the horns and began to talk to it as if it were possessed of reason and understanding.
Ah, wanderer, wanderer, spotty, spotty, how have you gone limping all this time? What wolves have frightened you, my daughter? Won't you tell me what is the matter, my beauty? But what else can it be, except that you are a she and cannot keep quiet? Plague on your humors and the humors of those you take after. Come back, my darling. And if you will not be so happy, at any rate, you will be safe in the fold or with your companions. For if you ought to keep and lead them go wandering astray, what will become of them?
The goatherd's talk amused all who heard it, but especially the canon, who said to him,
As you live, brother, take it easy, and be not in such a hurry to drive this goat back to the fold, for, being a female, as you say, she will follow her natural instinct in spite of all you can do to prevent it.
Okay.
Take this morsel and drink a sup, and that will soothe your irritation, and in the meantime the goat will rest herself.
And so saying, he handed him the loins of a cold rabbit on a fork. The goatherd took it with thanks, and drank and calmed himself, and then said,
I should be sorry if your worships were to take me for a simpleton for having spoken so seriously as I did to this animal, but the truth is there is a certain mystery in the words I used. I am a clown, but not so much of one that I know how to behave to men and to beasts. That I can well believe, said the curate, for I know already by experience that the woods breed men of learning, and shepherds' huts harbour philosophers. At all events, signor, returned the goatherd, they shelter men of experience, and that you may see the truth of this and grasp it, though I may seem to put myself forward without being asked, I will, if it will not tire you, gentlemen, and you will give me your attention for a little, tell you a true story, which will confirm this gentleman's word, and he pointed to the curate, as well as my own.
The curate. Oh, the curate was speaking there, not the not the canon. Losing track of who's who at this point. To this, Don Quixote replied,
Seeing that this affair has a certain colour of chivalry about it, I, for my part, brother, will hear you most gladly. And so will all these gentlemen, from the high intelligence they possess, and their love of curious novelties that interest, charm, and entertain the mind, as I feel quite sure your story will do. So begin, friend, for we are all prepared to listen.
I draw my stakes, said Sancho, and will retreat with this pasty to the brook there, where I mean to victual myself for 3 days. For I have heard my lord Don Quixote say that a knight-errant squire should eat until he can hold no more, whenever he has the chance, because it often happens them to get by accident into a wood so thick that they cannot find a way out of it for 6 days. And if the man is not well filled, or his alforjas well stored, there he may stay, as very often he does, turned into a dry mummy.
Thou art in the right of it, Sancho, said Don Quixote. Go where thou wilt, and eat all thou canst, for I have had enough, and only want to give my mind its refreshment, as I shall by listening to this good fellow's story."
"It is what we shall all do," said the canon, and then begged the goatherd to begin the promised tale. The goatherd gave the goat, which he held by the horns, a couple of slaps on the back, saying,
"Lie down here beside me, Spotting, for we have time enough to return to our fold."
The goat seemed to understand him, for as her master seated himself, she stretched herself quietly beside him and looked up in his face to show him she was all attention to what he was going to say. And then, in these words, he began his story. All right, I think, if I remember right, 52 is the end of part 1. But yep, okay, yeah. So we have 2 chapters left, and of the 2, it's like one of it is the goatherd story, and then the other is the outcome thereof. So let's go ahead and take a short break here, where it's a little bit early for our break, but let's it's a good potential breaking point. So we'll stretch our legs, top up our drinks, and be back for the last 2 chapters. Yeah, of course, we need one more detour in. It's Don Quixote. The whole story is detours. The whole point is that it meanders without end. I would have liked to see a Don Quixote adventure in the end of this first volume, but I guess that's just the way it goes. The first volume was, the first half was adventures, and the second half was just about all side stories. Yeah, actually, I think it was just about all side stories in the second half. Hey. All right, we'll be back in just a few minutes. Thanks, guys. Alright, we are back. Cats have found themselves up in the cat tree over my shoulder, so we've got a little bit of extra company tonight. So, we have 2 chapters remaining in this first volume of Don Quixote, and I don't think either of them are terribly long. Let's take a peek ahead, actually, now that I'm thinking of it. The last chapter of this volume has got a little bit of heft to it. So, we have a little bit of misadventure remaining to us, I'm sure. We'll find a way I'm sure Don Quixote will find a way to make the most of this little bit of an ending. And yeah, they are adorable little gremlins. Particularly when they're tuckered out and sleeping. When I'm trying to work and Zoe is deciding that it is a great time to be digging up the cords along the wall, or to be actually climbing the curtains. A little less cute, but gremlin mode does just go full bore sometimes. That's life with cats. That's just how it goes. Oh, jeez. Yeah, the love bites that maybe are a little bit more aggressive than you might particularly appreciate. Yeah, my old man that left us last year was that way. He would just sometimes just have a nice little tromp. If it drew blood, well, you shouldn't have been in his way. All right, let's go ahead and dive back in now to our last 2 chapters of this first volume of Don Quixote. Yeah, he was a good boy. All right. Chapter 51, which deals with what the goatherd told those who were carrying off Don Quixote. "3 leagues from this valley, there's a village, which, though small, is one of the richest in all this neighborhood. And in it there lived a farmer, a very worthy man, and so much respected that, although to be so is the natural consequence of being rich, he was even more respected for his virtue than for the wealth he had acquired. But what made him still more fortunate, as he said himself, was having a daughter of such exceeding beauty, rare intelligence, gracefulness, and virtue, that everyone who knew her and beheld her marveled at the extraordinary gifts with which heaven and nature had endowed her. As a child, she was beautiful. She continued to grow in beauty, and at the age of 16 she was most lovely. The fame of her beauty began to spread abroad through all the villages around. But why do I say the villages around? Merely when it spread to distant cities, and even made its way into the halls of royalty, and reached the ears of people of every class, who came from all sides to see her as if to see something rare and curious, something wonder-working image. Her father watched over her, and she watched over herself, for there are no locks or guards or bolts that can protect a young girl better than her own modesty. The wealth of the father and the beauty of the daughter led many neighbors, as well as strangers, to seek her for a wife. But he, as one might well be who had the disposal of so rich a jewel, was perplexed, and unable to make up his mind to which of her countless suitors he should entrust her. I was one among the many who felt a desire so natural, and as her father knew who I was, and I was of the same town, of pure blood, in the bloom of life, and very rich in possessions, I had great hopes of success. There was another of the same place and qualifications who also sought her, and this made her father's choice hang in the balance, for he felt that on either of us his daughter would be well bestowed. So, to escape from this state of perplexity, he resolved to refer the matter to Leandra, for that is the name of the rich damsel who has reduced me to misery. Reflecting that, as we were both equal, it would be best to leave it to his dear daughter to choose, according to her inclination. Of course, that is worthy of imitation by all fathers who wish to settle their children in life. I do not mean that they ought to leave them to make a choice of what is contemptible and bad, but they should place before them what is good, and then allow them to make a good choice as they please. I do not know which Leandra chose. I only know her father put us both off with the tender age of his daughter and vague words that neither bound him nor dismissed us. My rival is called Anselmo. Sound familiar? And I myself, Eugenio, that you may know the names of the personages that figure in this tragedy, the end of which is still in suspense, though it is plain to see it must be disastrous. About this time, there arrived in our town one Vicente de la Roca, the son of a poor peasant of the same town. The said Vicente having returned from service as a soldier in Italy, and divers other parts. A captain who chanced to pass that way with his company had carried him off from our village when he was a boy of about 12 years. And now, 12 years later, the young man came back in a soldier's uniform, arrayed in 1,000 colors, and all over glass trinkets and fine steel chains. Today, he would appear in one gay dress, tomorrow in another, but all flimsy and gaudy, of little substance and less worth. The peasant folk, who are naturally malicious, and when they had nothing to do, can be malice itself, remarked all this, and took note of his finery and jewelry, piece by piece, and discovered that he had 3 suits of different colors, with garters and stockings to match, but he made so many arrangements and combinations out of them that if they had not counted them, anyone would have sworn that he had made a display of more than 10 suits of clothes and 20 plumes. Do not look upon all this that I am telling you about the clothes as uncalled for or spun out, for they have a great deal to do with the story. He used to seat himself on a bench under the great poplar in our plaza, and there he would keep us all hanging open-mouthed on the stories he told us of his exploits. There was no country on the face of the globe he had not seen, nor battle he had not been engaged in. He had killed more Moors than there are in Morocco and Tunis, and fought more single combats, according to his own account, than Garcilaso, Diego Garcia de Paredes, and 1,000 others he named. And out of all, he had come victorious, without losing a drop of blood. On the other hand, he showed marks of wounds, which, though they could not be made out, he said were gunshot wounds, received in diverse encounters and actions. Lastly, with monstrous impudence, he used to say, "You," to his equals, and even those who knew what he was, and declared that his arm was his father and his deeds his pedigree, and that being a soldier, he was as good as the king himself. And to add to these swaggering ways, he was a trifle of a musician, and played the guitar with such a flourish that some said he made it speak. Nor did his accomplishments end here, for he was something of a poet too, and on every trifle that happened in the town, he made a ballad a league long. This soldier, then, that I have described, this Vicente de la Roca, This bravo, gallant musician, poet, was often seen and watched by Leandra from a window of her house, which looked out on the plaza. The glitter of his showy attire took her fancy. His ballads bewitched her, for he gave away 20 copies of every one he made. The tales of his exploits, which he told about himself, came to her ears, and, in short, as the devil no doubt had arranged it, she fell in love with him before the presumption of making love to her had suggested itself to him. And, as in love affairs, none are more easily brought to an issue than those which have the inclination of the lady for an ally. Leandra and Vicente came to an understanding without any difficulty, and before any of her numerous suitors had any suspicion of her design, she had already carried it into effect, having left the house of her dearly beloved father, for mother she had none, and disappeared from the village with the soldier, who came more triumphantly out of this enterprise than out of any of the large number he had laid claim to. All the village, and all who heard of it, were amazed at the affair. I was aghast, Anselmo thunderstruck, her father full of grief, her relations indignant, the authorities all in a ferment. The officers of the Brotherhood in arms, they scoured the roads, they searched the woods and all quarters, and at the end of 3 days, they found the flighty Leandra in a mountain cave, stripped to her shift and robbed of all the money and precious jewels she had carried away from home with her. They brought her back to her unhappy father, and questioned her as to her misfortune, and she confessed, without pressure, that Vicente de la Roca had deceived her, and under promise of marrying her, had induced her to leave her father's house, as he meant to take her to the richest and most delightful city in the whole world, which was Naples, and that she, ill-advised and deluded, had believed him, and robbed her father, and handed over all to him the night she disappeared, and that he had carried away to a rugged mountain and shut her up in the cave where they had found her. She said, moreover, that the soldier, without robbing her of her honor, had taken from her everything she had, and made off, leaving her in the cave, a thing that still further surprised everybody. It was not easy for us to credit the young man's countenance. And I'm not quite sure that we're having a good connection here. One moment. My preview window has decided that it wanted to do its thing. Yep, now we're dropping frames. There we go. Yeah, just a couple frames dropped, but I think this one might be local internet going on. So just to hang on a moment, catching up. All right, I think we're back to normal here. We look good on Twitch and YouTube both here. A little delay there on. Thank you, YouTube, for telling me that we're having connection issues now that the connection issues are finished. Classic YouTube, classic. Alright, yep, not seeing any drop frames, and I think we're live. Okay, cool. It was not easy for us to credit the young man's countenance, but she asserted it with such earnestness that it helped to console her distressed father, who thought nothing of what had been taken, since the jewel that once lost can never be recovered, had been left to his daughter. The same day that Leandra made her appearance, her father removed her from our sight, and took her away to shut her up in a convent in a town near this, in the hope that time may wear away some of the disgrace she has incurred. Leandra's youth furnished an excuse for her fault, at least with those to whom it was of no consequence whether she was good or bad. But those who knew her shrewdness and intelligence did not attribute her misdemeanor to ignorance, but to wantonness, and the natural disposition of women, which is for the most part flighty and ill-regulated. Says the goatherd. Leandra, withdrawn from sight, Anselmo's eyes grew blind, or at any rate found nothing to look at that gave them any pleasure, and mine were in darkness, without a ray of light to direct them to anything enjoyable while Leandra was away. Our melancholy grew greater. Our patience grew less. We cursed the soldiers' finery and railed at the carelessness of Leandra's father. At last, Anselmo and I agreed to leave the village and come to this valley. And he, feeding a great flock of sheep of his own, and I, a large herd of goats of mine, we pass our life among the trees, giving vent to our sorrows, together singing the fair Leandra's praises, or upbraiding her, or else sighing alone, and to heaven pouring forth our complaints in solitude. Following our example, many more of Leandra's lovers have come to these rude mountains and adopted our mode of life, and they are so numerous that one would fancy the place had been turned into the pastoral Arcadia, so full is it of shepherds and sheepfolds, nor is there a spot in it where the name of the fair Leandra is not heard. Here, one curses her and calls her capricious, fickle, and immodest. There, another condemns her as frail and frivolous. This pardons and absolves her. That spurns and reviles her. One extols her beauty, another assails her character. And, in short, all abuse her, and all adore her. And to such a pitch has this general infatuation gone, that there are some who complain of her scorn without ever having exchanged a word with her, and even some that bewail and mourn the raging fever of jealousy, for which she never gave anyone cause. For, as I have already said, her misconduct was known before her passion. There is no nook among the rocks, no brookside, no shade beneath the trees that is not haunted by some shepherd telling his woes to the breezes. Wherever there is an echo, it repeats the name of Leandra. The mountains ring with Leandra, Leandra, murmur the brooks, and Leandra keeps us all bewildered and bewitched, hoping without hope, and fearing without knowing what we fear. All this silly set, the one that shows the least, and also the most sense, is my rival Anselmo. For having so many other things to complain of, he only complains of separation, and to the accompaniment of a rebec, which he plays admirably. He sings his complaints in verses that show his ingenuity. I follow another, easier, and to my mind, a wiser course, and that is to rail at the frivolity of women, at their inconstancy, their double-dealing, their broken promises, their unkept pledges, and in short, the want of reflection they show in fixing their affections and inclinations. This, sirs, was the reason of words and expressions I made use of to this goat when I came up just now. For, as she is a female, I have a contempt for her, though she is the best in all my fold. This is the story I promised to tell you, and if I have been tedious in telling it, I will not be slow to serve you. My hut is close by, and I have fresh milk and dainty cheese there, as well as a variety of toothsome fruit, no less pleasing to the eye than to the palate. And that brings us to the end of chapter 51, in which the incel goatherd tells his story. And now we have the last chapter in this first volume of Don Quixote, chapter 52, of the quarrel that Don Quixote had with the goatherd, together with the rare adventure of the penitents, which, with an expenditure of sweat, he brought to a happy conclusion. Well, okay, so I can't really fault Don Quixote for coming to a disagreement with the goatherd, because, honestly, you just sat through that story. He's kind of an insufferable little guy. I mean, most incels are, but Don Quixote, he's not going to stand for it. I have a feeling, maybe not on the same principles that you and I hold for disdain for this guy, but Don Quixote is gonna stand up against him. Say what you will. Don Quixote may be mostly misled, but every once in a while, broken clock, you know. Yeah, it is incredibly on brand. It's just right for the last chapter of the first volume to be Don Quixote picking a fight with a side character that we just met. That is probably entirely innocent. Just going off. I can't think of any better way for it to end, honestly. All right. This next one is a little bit longer, but not too much. And I imagine there's probably a couple pictures in here that'll fill the space, so it probably won't even be the full 10 pages. So, let's see how this story is going to reach its conclusion. The goatherd's tale gave great satisfaction to all the hearers, and the canon especially enjoyed it, for he had remarked with particular attention the manner in which it had been told, which was as unlike the manner of a clownish goatherd as it was like that of a polished city wit. And he observed that the curate had been quite right in saying that the woods bred men of learning. They all offered their services to Eugenio, but he who showed himself most liberal in this way was Don Quixote, who said to him, "Most assuredly, brother goatherd, if I found myself in a position to attempt any adventure, I would this very instant set out on your behalf and would rescue Leandra from that convent, where no doubt she is kept against her will, in spite of the abbess and all who might try to prevent me, and would place her in your hands to deal with her according to your will and pleasure, observing, however, the laws of chivalry, which lay down that no violence of any kind is to be offered to any damsel. But I trust in God our Lord, that the might of one malignant enchanter may not prove so great, but that the power of another better disposed may prove superior to it. And then I promise you my support and assistance as I am bound to do by my profession, which is none other than to give aid to the weak and needy." The goatherd eyed him, and, noticing Don Quixote's sorry appearance and looks, he was filled with wonder, and asked the barber who was next to him, "Signor, who is this man who makes such a figure and talks in such a strain?" "Who should it be," said the barber, "but the famous Don Quixote of La Mancha, the undoer of injustice, the righter of wrongs, the protector of damsels, the terror of giants, and the winner of battles." "That," said the goatherd, "sounds like what one reads in the books of the knights errant, who did all that you say this man does. Though it is my belief that either you are joking, or else this gentleman has empty lodgings in his head." "You are a great scoundrel," said Don Quixote, "and it is you who are empty and a fool. I am fuller than ever was the horse-on bitch that bore you. Damn." And passing from words to deeds, he caught up a loaf that was near him and sent it full in the goatherd's face. with such force that he flattened his nose. But the goatherd, who did not understand jokes and found himself roughly handled in such good earnest, paying no respect to carpet, tablecloth, or diners, sprang upon Don Quixote, and seizing him by the throat with both hands, would no doubt have throttled him, had not Sancho Panza that instant come to the rescue, and grasping him by the shoulders, flung him down on the table, smashing plates, breaking glasses, and upsetting and scattering everything on it. Don Quixote, finding himself free, strove to get on top of the goatherd, who, with his face covered with blood and soundly kicked by Sancho, was on all fours feeling about for one of the table knives to take bloody revenge with. The canon and the curate, however, prevented him, but the barber so contrived it that he got Don Quixote under him, and rained down upon him such a shower of fisticuffs that the poor knight's face streamed with blood as freely as his own. The canon and the curate were bursting with laughter. The officers were capering with delight, and both the one and the other hissed them on as they do dogs that are worrying one another in a fight. Sancho alone was frantic, for he could not free himself from the grasp of one of the canon's servants, who kept him from going to his master's assistance. Okay. Seriously. What? I have to say, the people that are out trying to do good for Don Quixote and help him are actually awful people about half the time. The curate and the barber just egging things along and then cheering it on like a dogfight as they're watching a madman fight with a guy that's just been out in the wilderness. Excuse me? At last, while they were all, with the exception of the two bruisers who were mauling each other, in high glee and enjoyment, they heard a trumpet note. A trumpet sound, a note so doleful that it made them all look in the direction whence the sound seemed to come. But the one that was most excited by hearing it was Don Quixote, who, though sorely against his will, he was under the goatherd, and something more than pretty well pummeled, said to him, "Brother devil!" It really is like late medieval Renaissance, whatever period this is, Always Sunny. Awful people being awful to each other, and somehow it's funny.
Brother devil, for it is impossible but that thou must be one, since thou hast had might and strength enough to overcome mine. I ask thee to agree to a truce, but for 1 hour, for the solemn note of yonder trumpet that falls on our ears seems to me to summon me to some new adventure.
The goatherd, who was by this time tired of pummeling and being pummeled, released him at once, and Don Quixote, rising to his feet and turning his eyes to the quarter where the sound had been heard, suddenly saw coming down the slope of a hill several men clad in white, like penitents. The fact was that the clouds had that year withheld their moisture from the earth, and in all the villages of the districts they were organizing processions, rogations, and penances, imploring God to open the hands of his mercy and send the rain. And to this end, the people of a village that was hard by were going in procession to a holy hermitage. There was on one side of that valley. Don Quixote, when he saw the strange garb of the penitents, without reflecting how often he had seen it before, took it into his head that this was a case of adventure, and that it fell to him alone as a knight-errant to engage in it. And he was all the more confirmed in this notion by the idea that an image draped in black they had with them was some illustrious lady that these villains and discourteous thieves were carrying off by force. As soon as this occurred to him, he ran with all speed to Rocinante, who was grazing at large, and, taking the bridle and the buckler from the saddle-bow, he had him bridled in an instant. And calling to Sancho for his sword, he mounted Rocinante,
braced his buckler on his arm, and said in a loud voice, exclaimed to those who stood by, "Now, noble company, ye shall see how important it is that there should be knights in the world professing the order of knight-errantry. Now, I say, ye shall see, by the deliverance of that worthy lady who was born captive there, whether knights-errant deserve to be held in estimation." And so saying, he brought his legs to bear on Rocinante, for he had no spurs, and at a full canter, for in all this voracious history we never read of Rocinante fairly galloping, set off to encounter the penitents, though the curate, the canon, and the barber ran to prevent him. But it was out of their power. Nor did he even stop for the shouts of Sancho calling after him, "Where are you going, Señor Don Quixote? What devils have possessed you to set you on against our Catholic faith? Plague take me! Mind, that is a procession of penitents, and the lady they are carrying on that stand there is the blessed image of the Immaculate Virgin. Take care what you are doing, Señor, for this time, it may be safely said, you don't know what you are about." Sancho labored in vain, for his master was so bent on coming to quarters with these sheeted figures and releasing the lady in black that he did not hear a word. And even had he heard, he would not have turned back if the king had ordered him. He came up with the procession and reined in Rocinante, who was already anxious enough to slacken speed a little. And in a hoarse, excited voice he exclaimed, "You who hide your faces, perhaps because you are not good subjects, pay attention and listen to what I am about to say to you." The first to halt were those who were carrying the image, and one of the four ecclesiastics who were chanting the litany, struck by the strange figure of Don Quixote, the leanness of Rocinante, and the other ludicrous peculiarities he observed, said in reply to him, "Brother, if you have anything to say to us, say it quickly, for these brethren are whipping themselves, and we cannot stop, nor is it reasonable we should stop to hear anything, unless it is short enough to be said in 2 words." "I will say it in 1, replied Don Quixote, "and it is this, that at once, this very instant, you release that fair lady, whose tears and sad aspect show plainly that ye are carrying her off against her will, and that ye have committed some scandalous outrage against her, and I, who was born into the world to redress all such like wrongs, will not permit you to advance another step until you have restored to her the liberty she pines for and deserves." Oh yes, 1 word. 1 word. Very nicely done, Don Quixote. Counting, not necessarily one of your strongest suits. From these words, all the hearers concluded that he must be a madman, and began to laugh heartily. And their laughter acted like gunpowder on Don Quixote's fury, for drawing his sword without another word, he made a rush at the stand. One of those who supported it, leaving the burden to his comrades, advanced to meet him, flourishing a forked stick that he had for propping up the stand when resting. And with this, he caught a mighty cut Don Quixote made at him that severed it in 2. But with the portion that remained in his hand, he dealt such a thwack on the shoulder of Don Quixote's sword arm, which the buckler could not protect against the clownish assault, that poor Don Quixote came to the ground in a sad plight. Sancho Panza, who was coming on close behind, puffing and blowing, seeing him fall, cried out to his assailant not to strike him again, for he was a poor enchanted knight, who had never harmed anyone all the days of his life. But what checked the clown was not Sancho's shouting, but seeing that Don Quixote did not stir hand or foot, and so fancying he had killed him, he hastily hitched up his tunic under his girdle and took to his heels across the country like a deer. By this time, all Don Quixote's companions had come up to where he lay, but the processionists, seeing them come running, and with them the officers of the Brotherhood, with their crossbows
crossbows apprehended mischief, and clustering round the image, raised their hoods and grasped their scourges, as the priests did their tapers, and awaited the attack, resolved to defend themselves, and even to take the offensive against their assailants if they could. Fortune, however, arranged the matter better than they expected, for all Sancho did was to fling himself on his master's body, raising over him the most doleful and laughable lamentation that ever was heard, for he believed he was dead. The curate was known to another curate who walked in the procession, and their recognition of one another set at rest the apprehensions of both parties. The first then told the other in 2 words who Don Quixote was, and he and the whole troop of penitents went to see if the poor gentleman was dead, and heard Sancho Panza saying, with tears in his eyes, "O flower of chivalry, what with one blow of a stick hast ended the course of thy well-spent life. O pride of thy race, honour and glory of all La Mancha, nay, of all the world, that for want of thee will be full of evildoers, no longer in fear of punishment for their misdeeds. O thou generous above all the Alexanders, since for only 8 months of service thou hast given me the best island the sea girds or surrounds, humble with the proud, haughty with the humble, encounterer of dangers, endurer of outrages, enamoured without reason, imitator of the good, scourge of the wicked, enemy of the mean, in short, knight-errant, which is all that can be said." At the cries and moans of Sancho, Don Quixote came to himself, and the first word he said was,
"He who lives separated from you, sweetest Dulcinea, has greater miseries to endure than these. Aid me, friend Sancho, to mount the enchanted cart, for I am not in a condition to press the saddle of Rocinante, as this shoulder is all knocked to pieces." "That I will do with all my heart, señor," said Sancho, "and let us return to our village with these gentlemen who seek your good, and there we will prepare for making another sally, which may turn out more profitable and creditable to us." "Thou art right, Sancho," returned Don Quixote. "It will be wise to let the malign influence of the stars, which now prevails, pass off."
The canon, the curate, and the barber told him he would act very wisely in doing as he said, and so, highly amused at Sancho Panza's simplicities, they placed Don Quixote in the cart as before. The procession once more formed itself in order and proceeded on its road. The goatherd took his leave of the party, the officers of the Brotherhood declined to go any farther, and the curate paid them what was due to them. The canon begged the curate to let him know how Don Quixote did, whether he was cured of his madness or still suffered from it, and then begged leave to continue his journey. In short, they all separated and went their ways, leaving to themselves the curate and the barber, Don Quixote, Sancho Panza, and the good Rocinante, who regarded everything with as great resignation as his master. The carter yoked his oxen and made Don Quixote comfortable on a truss of hay, and as his usual deliberate pace took the road the curate directed, and at the end of 6 days they reached Don Quixote's village, and entered it about the middle of the day, which it so happened was a Sunday, and the people were all in the plaza, through which Don Quixote's cart passed. They all flocked to see what was in the cart, and when they recognized their townsman, they were filled with amazement. And a boy ran off to bring the news to his housekeeper and his niece that their master and uncle had come back all lean and yellow and stretched on a truss of hay on an ox cart. It was piteous to hear the cries the 2 good ladies raised, how they beat their breasts and poured out fresh maledictions on those accursed books of chivalry, all which was renewed when they saw Don Quixote coming in at the gate. At the news of Don Quixote's arrival, Sancho Panza's wife came running, for she by this time knew that her husband had gone away with him as his squire, and on seeing Sancho, the first thing she asked him was if the ass was well. Sancho replied that he was, better than his master was.
"Thanks be to God," said she, "for being so good to me. But now tell me, my friend, what have you made by your squirings? What gown have you brought me back? What shoes for your children?"
"I bring nothing of that sort, wife," said Sancho, "though I bring other things of more consequence and value."
"I am very glad of that," returned his wife. "Show me these things of more value and consequence, my friend, for I want to see them to cheer my heart that has been so sad and heavy all these ages that you have been away."
"I will show them to you at home, wife," said Sancho. "Be content for the present, for if it please God that we should again go on our travels in search of adventures, you will soon see me a count, or governor of an island, and that not one of those everyday ones, but the best that is to be had."
"Heaven grant it, husband," said she, "for indeed we have need of it. But tell me, what's this about islands, for I don't understand it."
"Honey is not for the mouth of the ass," returned Sancho. "All in good time thou shalt see, wife. Nay, thou wilt be surprised to hear thyself called your ladyship by all thy vassals."
"What are you talking about, Sancho, with your ladyships, islands, and vassals?" returned Teresa Panza, for so Sancho's wife was called, though they were not relations, for in La Mancha it is customary for wives to take their husbands' surnames.
"Don't be in such a hurry to know all this, Teresa," said Sancho. "It is enough that I am telling you the truth, so shut your mouth. But I may tell you this much, by the way, that there is nothing in the world more delightful than to be a person of consideration, squire to a knight-errant, and a seeker of adventures. To be sure, most of those one finds do not end as pleasantly as one could wish, for out of 100, 99 will turn out cross and contrary. I know it by experience, for out of some I came blanketed, and out of others belaboured. Still, for all that, it is a fine thing to be on the lookout for what may happen, crossing mountains, searching woods, climbing rocks, visiting castles, putting up at inns, and all at free quarters, and devil take the merit at Viti to pay." While this conversation passed between Sancho Panza and his wife, Don Quixote's housekeeper and niece took him in and undressed him, and laid him in his old bed. He eyed them askance, and could not make out where he was. The curate charged his niece to be very careful to make her uncle comfortable, and to keep a watch over him, lest he should make his escape from them again, telling her that they had been obliged to bring him home. On this, the pair once more lifted up their voices and renewed their maledictions upon the books of chivalry, and implored heaven to plunge the authors of such lies and nonsense into the midst of the bottomless pit. They were, in short, kept in anxiety and dread, lest their uncle and master should give them the slip the moment he found himself somewhat better. And as they feared, so it fell out. But the author of this history, though he has devoted research and industry to the discovery of the deeds achieved by Don Quixote in his third sally, has been unable to obtain any information respecting them. At any rate, derived from authentic documents, tradition has merely preserved in the memory of La Mancha the fact that Don Quixote, the third time he sallied forth from his home, betook himself to Saragossa, where he was present at some famous jousts which came off in that city, and that he had adventures there worthy of his valor and high intelligence. Of his end and death he could learn no particulars, nor would he have ascertained it or known of it, if good fortune had not produced an old physician for him, who had in his possession a leaden box, which, according to his account, had been discovered among the crumbling foundations of an ancient hermitage that was being rebuilt, in which box were found certain parchment manuscripts, in Gothic character, but in Castilian verse, containing many of his achievements, and setting forth the beauty of Dulcinea, the form of Rocinante, the fidelity of Sancho Panza, and the burial of Don Quixote himself, together with sundry epitaphs and eulogies on his life and character. But all that could be read and deciphered were those which the trustworthy author of this new and unparalleled history here presents. And the said author asks of those that shall read it nothing in return for the vast toil which it has cost him in examining and searching the Manchegan archives in order to bring it to light, save that they give him the same credit that people of sense give to the books of chivalry that pervade the world and are so popular. For with this he will consider himself amply paid and fully satisfied, and will be encouraged to seek out and produce other histories, if not as truthful, at least equal in invention and not less entertaining. The first words written on the parchment found in the leathern box were these: The academicians of Argamasilla, a village of La Mancha, on the life and death of Don Quixote of La Mancha, hoc scripserunt. Monicongo Academician of Argamasilla on the tomb of Don Quixote. Epitaph. The scatterbrain that gave La Mancha more rich spoils than Jason's, who a point so keen had to his wit, and happier far had been if his wit's weathercock a blunter bore. The arm renowned far as Gaeta's shore, Cathay, and all the lands that lie between. The muse discreet and terrible in mien, as ever wrote on brass in days of yore. He who surpassed the Amadises all, and who as not the Galeors accounted, supported by his love and gallantry, who made the Belanices sing small, and sought renown on Rocinante mounted. Here, underneath this cold stone doth he lie, Paniaguado Academician of Argamasilla, in laudum Dulcinea del Toboso. Sonnet. She, whose full features may be here descried, high-bosomed, with a bearing of disdain, is Dulcinea, she for whom in vain the great Don Quixote of La Mancha sighed, for her Toboso's queen from side to side. He traversed the grim Sierra, the champaign of Aranjuez, and Montiel's famous plain. On Rocinante oft a weary ride, malignant planets, cruel destiny pursued them both, the fair Manchegan dame, and the unconquered star of chivalry. Nor youth, nor beauty saved her from the claim of death. He paid love's bitter penalty, and left the marble to preserve his name. Capricoso, a most acute academician. Wow, why can't I say that word? Academician. Yeah, there it was. Academician of Argamasilla, in praise of Rocinante, steed of Don Quixote of La Mancha. Sonnet. On that proud throne of diamantine sheen, which the blood-reeking feet of Mars degrade, the mad Manchegan's banner now hath been. By him, in all its bravery displayed, there hath he hung his arms and trenchant blade, wherewith, achieving deeds till now unseen, he slays, lays low, cleaves, hews, but art hath made a novel style for our new paladin. If Amadis be the proud boast of Gaul, if by his progeny the fame of Greece through all the regions of the earth be spread, great Quixote, crowned in grim Bellona's hall, today exalts La Mancha over these, and above Greece or Gaul she holds her head, nor ends his glory here, for his good steed doth Brillador and Bayard far exceed. As mettled steeds compared with Rocinante, the reputation they have won is scanty. Brillador, Academician of Argamasilla, on Sancho Panza. Sonnet. The worthy Sancho Panza, here you see, a great soul once was in that body small, nor was there squire upon this earthly ball so plain and simple, or of guile so free. Within an ace of being count was he, and would have been but for the spite and gall of this vile age, mean and illiberal, that cannot even let a donkey be. For mounted on an ass, excuse the word. What? You can't. Now you do it? I'm sorry, I had to break rhythm there. What? By Rocinante's side this gentle squire was wont his wandering master to attend, delusive hopes that lure the common herd, with promises of ease the heart's desire. In shadows, dreams, and smoke ye always end. Yeah, that is certainly admission that it's been on purpose. But you have to let us keep the little bit of the suspension of disbelief. You can't just pierce the veil like that. I guess doing it once is fine, but I don't like it. Carci Diablo, Academician of Argamasilla, on the tomb of Don Quixote. Epitaph. The knight lies here below, ill errant and bruised sore, whom Rocinante bore in his wanderings to and fro. By the side of the knight is laid stolid man Sancho too, than whom a squire more true was not in the esquire trade. Hold on. Is this next guy's name Tiki-Tok? Really? Tiki-Tok. Oh, tongue-tied just by getting stun-locked by this guy's name. Tiki-Tok, Academician of Argamasilla, on the tomb of Dulcinea del Toboso. Epitaph. Here Dulcinea lies. Plump was she, and robust. Now she is ashes and dust. The end of all flesh that dies. A lady of high degree, with the port of a lofty dame, and the great Don Quixote's flame, and the pride of her village was she. These were all the verses that could be deciphered. The rest, the writing being worm-eaten, were handed over to one of the academicians to make out their meaning conjecturally. We have been informed that, at the cost of many sleepless nights and much toil, he has succeeded, and that he means to publish them in hopes of Don Quixote's third sally. Forse altro cantera con miglior pletro. Alright, that brings us to the end of Volume 1 of Don Quixote. I'll go ahead and make a bookmark here at Volume 2, but we'll back up. So, that was... Oh, hang on. That has been the first volume of Don Quixote. And really, the way the first volume ended felt very much like an ending altogether. In all likelihood, they were probably written several, if not many, years apart, and just sort of lumped together, I would say. Which isn't necessarily bad or wrong by any stretch of the imagination, but, I mean, it's not too different from modern fantasy writers when they publish something after 10 years. Martin. So it's not unheard of, but I that's the sort of the idea that I'm getting from this, because the end of that one, after you've been brought home, definitely felt like tying up all of the loose ends and saying, okay, and this is all there is. It was a reasonably satisfying ending, all told. We didn't see further adventures, but honestly, as beaten and bruised as Don Quixote had been, it wouldn't have surprised me if he hadn't gone on more adventures. Although they did say there was a third Sally, but it was off screen, such as it was. But really, an old man that gets Lord knows how many broken bones, bruises, and batteries throughout his 2 misadventures. Yeah, exactly. You think you told the whole story, and then later you're like, you know what, I could come up with something extra. Some sort of a side story or a prequel laid in. Like, it's understandable. I get it. So you can have a good ending, but still have the desire to write more. George Lucas. But, so, I enjoyed this one. Don Quixote was a book that I had been wanting to read for a long time once we started this. For some reason, it took me a very long while to find it. But I'm glad we tackled it when we did. I think if we'd done it a little bit sooner in the channel's history, I don't think that I could have really done it justice. Some of the times when Don Quixote got heated were a lot of fun, and it benefited from being able to really lay it out there like we did. Particularly when he was really ranting and raving a few times. Those were a lot of fun to go through and just belt it out. So, part of me was disappointed that it took so long to get to Don Quixote, but in the end, I think I'm happy with that. I think it was all for the best. So, now we have to think, what do we want to read next? I have a few ideas. It might be time to take a spin with James Joyce. Maybe we can read Ulysses. Or we can look about other options. There's so much that we can go through. Visit some different... we've still got some backlog of... we've got a few short stories left from Lovecraft, I think, that we can touch back on to sort of fill things along. So yeah, we've got lots of choices. As always, that's sort of our problem, is that we are spoiled for choice, really. Let's see. Just looking here at the popular downloads on Gutenberg in the last little while. Yeah, there's just so much that we could do. Oh man, Tolstoy. No, that's dangerous. So anyway, so we've got a few days. Yeah. So our next scheduled reading is going to be on Friday. So if you find anything, if you've got something that you'd like to hear read that you've been meaning to get to but haven't gotten to in a while, something that you want to suffer through together with me, or something that you got an old favorite that you want to share, I don't think we're ready for Tolstoy after going through with Don Quixote and bailing out after half. If you got anything that you want to share with us, share with the community, feel free to reach out, whether it be on a comment on YouTube, ping me on Bluesky, find me on Discord, wherever you've managed to get in contact. I am all ears. Because, as I mentioned earlier on in tonight's reading, before tonight's reading, if you let me, I will fall into the comfortable ruts of stories that I've tread before. And that's no fun, really. If we're going to be reading together, we need to have some adventure of our own. If Don Quixote and old men from La Mancha can have an adventure, so can I, damn it. So can I. And you're here with me. Adventure together. Alright, so we actually are very nearly on our normal time for the night. Which we may have milked it a little bit with some pre-reading talk and some post-reading talk, and that's fine by my books. But let's go ahead and wrap things up for the evening. We will be back for our next scheduled reading on Friday at our normal 8 o'clock start time on both YouTube and Twitch, as is the new normal. Those of you who are on YouTube, please feel free to drop a like on the stream, maybe a subscription to the channel. Let the algorithm know that we're doing some fun things around here. Those of you on Twitch, we're just getting started, and a little bit of attention, word of mouth is always more than welcome. But, as always, I'm in this for the love of the game. So, we'll just keep on keeping along. There's no need to feel obliged to shill too hard, though I will thank you for it. Alright, let's go ahead and call it a night tonight. As always, all of our VODs for the previous readings will be on the YouTube channel. And we'll see if you ever find the need, or think that you may have missed out on either a reading or want to catch up on some of our old books. They're there for you. Except for our new Saturday series. Those are our modern readings that you have to catch live. Eventually I'll get around to doing a rebroadcast. Alright guys, I'm just yammering at this point. So, let's go ahead and call it a very slightly early night. As always, thank you very much for joining us. I don't think there's any need for us to raid tonight. There's just a few of us in the Twitch tonight. So we'll just have a quiet evening. Thank you very much for joining us, and good night.